Hey there, you have found the Intentional Optimist Unconventional Leaders guest speaker series. I am Andrea Johnson, the Intentional Optimist, and I'm here with my guest, Dominique Cordero. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. And I'm just going to say we're coming on later than we expected because this is a great lesson for somebody who's like managing a bunch of things. I gave her the wrong information. So we were in two separate rooms
Waiting
and
for each other.
waiting for each other. We're like, I was looking forward to talking to her. So now I'm glad we made it together. We get to do this. And for those of you who may not be a subscriber to the podcast or may not have yet listened to episode 121, you'll want to because Dominique has a really special story. The title of the episode is You're Not. Is it Know Your Non-Negotiable or Your Own Non-Negotiable? Own Your
Yeah,
Non-Negotiables.
own your non-negotiable. Mm-hmm.
Because your main principle is to own whatever it is you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your thing. And as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, we have to own it
Yeah,
for each of us,
exactly.
for each of
That's
us.
right. That's
So if
right.
somebody hasn't, for those who have not listened to the podcast episode yet, could you give us just a little brief idea of kind of why we're going to be talking about what we're going to be talking about and who you are and who you serve?
Excellent. I am a Spanish language coach for adults. I have an online business called La Mariposa Spanish Lessons, where I help adults build Spanish into their life and make it a part of their lifelong journey, right? It becomes like exercising, right? And incorporating it in the life that they have and having it meet them where they are. So my courses and programs really foster that, which are all online for adults. And our topic today is making Spanish a non-negotiable in your life. And I have a lot of students who have started and stopped learning Spanish many times in their life. And what is kind of missing is that the building of that habit muscle and seeking out opportunities to incorporate Spanish in your life at different stages. So, back when I was learning Spanish, when I was living in Spain, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was able to really dive into immersion. But then I've got full-time mothers who are doing my programs. And so we work on fitting in Spanish, into their 10 minutes while they're waiting to pick up their child every day. So really helping them find a way to make Spanish that non-negotiable in their life and incorporate it into the daily rhythm that they're in, if that makes sense.
It does. And that's one of the things that I said, yeah, let's definitely talk about that. Because if you follow me at all, you know that I work on rhythms. I have 6 tenets. And I go through those twice a year. And I'm very big on looking at the natural rhythms of our lives, which either is on a daily basis or the habits that we have or quarterly or even yearly. And paying attention to what those rhythms are, because that is the most natural place to put something in. It's just like if somebody's doing jump rope, I can't even imagine doing double dutch at this point, but jump rope, you have to, if you watch somebody getting ready to jump in, then you see them kind of start doing this business before they actually jump in and start jumping with the jump rope.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I love that idea. And so maybe before we get into that, tell us a little bit about why I would want Spanish to be something that I put in my regular daily routine.
Well, I think learning a second language, particularly as an adult, is a really eye-opening, transformational experience that is incredibly humbling. And I feel like it makes you such a more well-rounded global person for yourself and for the people that you touch in your lives, your kids, your family, your community. And it just makes you more compassionate towards the world around you and opens up your eyes in incredible ways. Also, learning a second language is incredibly humbling because you're not able to communicate at first. And that can be very frustrating for adults. And learning to humble yourself along the process I think all adults should experience that.
Yeah,
To
and,
be a beginner again.
being a beginner, well, and most leadership coaches, many personal growth coaches will tell you having a beginner's mindset is the
Mhm.
best way to go about your life anyway.
Mhm.
So what I like seeing is the way anything that we put in our lives gives us the opportunity to be growth oriented.
Mhm.
And as somebody who grew up in a foreign country, what's interesting to me is that I grew up in Korea and South
Mhm.
Korea, and there they study English all through school,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
And so one of the things we mentioned even on the podcast episode was, or in our conversation, was that as English speakers, we kind of expect people to meet us where we are. But what a joy to see, and this kind of goes to your compassion thing, is to be able to meet somebody where they are. And
Mhm.
what little Korean I still have left, whenever I was able to use that in a situation when I was in the medical field or the university atmosphere, people just, they light up. It's amazing to see this. I don't know. It's like this, like a mask falls off, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just met up with some women in my community that are working on they're all mothers, and they are really into bilingual parenting. And one of the mothers told me that the father, her husband, his first language was Spanish, and that he was pretty confident in English, but that connecting with his daughter in Spanish was just on a whole nother level. And she said,
Mm,
if we weren't a Spanish household, it's like he could have never been his true self with his own daughter. And I think
mm,
that's so powerful, those connections in someone's first language. You can see a whole nother side of them, right? And
mm,
I say the same thing when I'm speaking in English versus Spanish. I'm almost like a different person.
mm.
I'm very different in both languages.
Well, and
So
in some circles, they call that your heart language, right?
yeah.
So whatever it is, that it is the most natural way to express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, I struggle as somebody who grew up young, hearing different languages and trying to take Spanish. And every once in a while, a Korean word will come out and it's like, no, 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 that's Spanish over here. And, but English is never, well, I'm not going to say I never struggle for words. I talk a lot, but there are times when I do struggle for words, but it's just so much more natural for me. And
Mm-hmm.
when you watch people light up and you watch the mask fall off and they become much more open, I love that beauty of connection. And that's kind of what we're all
Mm-hmm.
after, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to do it in two languages, I mean, what a
Mhm.
gift. Why wouldn't you? Why
Well,
wouldn't you?
let's talk
Mhm.
about that a little bit. Let's talk about how you would, how, because I don't expect you to give us a big Spanish lesson here, but how would you start talking? How do you work with adults differently than children, and how would you go about teaching that?
Mhm. Yeah, so a lot of work I do with adults starts with like a mindset shift, and talking about what their not so much what their goals are, but what the system that they're going to put in place is going to be. So I think everybody, when they come to me, they say, I want to be fluent. That's always the big general goal. That is a lofty goal, and it's very vague. So I try to take the goal vocabulary off the table and just say, look, in the next 3 months, what are we going to do to incorporate 30 minutes of Spanish per day?
Mm,
How is that going to be structured, and how is it also going to play on your strengths as a learner? I try to focus on what type of learner they are. Are they auditory, reader, writers, listener, or visual listening? What do they already enjoy doing? What has helped them learn in the past? And I tell them to focus on that.
mm,
So for example, someone like me who loves to read and write, if I had a student like that, I would tell them I'd give them a list of short books to read and tell them to start journaling every day. Um, that's kind of the fun piece of learning. And then I would also tell them, especially at the basic level, beginner level, to have some kind of structure, whether that's a tutor that's taking you through a curriculum, or a group class or course that you're taking that is taking you along those pillars of learning the language. Because
mhm,
there's so many resources out there that it's kind of like you join a gym and you get to the gym and there's all this equipment and you want to get fit, but how do you use the equipment? Like, which one do I use first? How do I use it? Right? That's where a course, a program, a really good teacher comes in, is to show you how to use all the equipment. So in terms of working with me, I have a kind of mix of different things. I've got group courses and group programs for students who really like to work in that group atmosphere. Those courses can also be self-paced for those who are maybe on a tighter budget, but are really self-motivated. And then I do some one-on-one client work for students who are really looking to see that growth in 3 to 6 months, because I don't go into lessons just endless one-to-one lessons. They're very much like, okay, this is where you're going to be in 3 months, and this is how we're going to get there. But it's going to be hard work. Are you ready? Let's go. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think we all say that. I have a new client this afternoon. It's like the first thing we say is just, how hard are you willing to work, right? It's like, it's all about you and it's your goal. And I love that it's, you know, it really is about how hard we are willing to work. What does it really mean to us? So if we were to start putting like 30 minutes a day in, what is, when you talk about rhythms, like there's nobody in my family that speaks Spanish. My husband took French in high school. So whenever he tries to speak Spanish, it comes out sounding a little bit like some kind of weird Portuguese thing. And so how would you start putting that practice in the rhythms of your life? Because not all of us have a bilingual home.
Yeah, exactly. So we can go back to our example of someone who enjoys reading and journaling, or reading and writing. They learn best that way. When I use the expression interest-based learning, it means like tying your interests with learning tactics that already work for you. So for example, if I was I'm a learner that learns through reading and writing, but I really love cooking. I might pick up a recipe book in Spanish, and I'm reading recipes in Spanish and learning that way. So that's kind of some interest-based learning. I've got my cookbook, and I make a plan that every day I'm going to read one recipe. Right. So that's cool. Finding your interests with studying Spanish. Now, at the beginning level, I definitely recommend some kind of structure, meaning class or a tutor. So, maybe you're meeting with your tutor twice a week, or you're taking a group classes twice a week. But then from that class, you're taking the homework, the materials, and you're breaking out 30 minutes a day to review those materials, create flashcards, doing some of that more structured practice on top of the fun stuff too.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to be like, I wasn't laughing at you. I was just automatically thinking, if I had a Spanish recipe book, what on earth would be on the stove? Because it would, you need to make sure that you've got something there to help you with the vocabulary, to make sure you're buying the right material.
I know. I mean, yeah, if you got to a point where you're like ambitious enough to start making all the recipes, but you could start with just like reading them and seeing like how much you understand of the recipe. And, you could use it like any book, and you can write in the margins, like I do, write in the margins, learn new vocabulary about food, and words about cooking, because you already like that in your daily life, right?
Now, see, that makes sense. The doer in me was automatically like,
let's cook.
Yeah, the paella is going to have, it needs to be rice.
Exactly.
It's like, it has to have all the right things in it. It needs to have some saffron, I mean, and I'm sure some of the words are, translatable. Sorry, I just went immediately into the action.
No worries. Now, if you were a kinesthetic learner like you, I might tell you to go start cooking with the cookbook. Now, if you were a visual and more of auditory learner, I would tell you to get on YouTube and watch cooking shows in Spanish. So it's really tied into interests plus your learning style. Now, that can't be all you're doing, but that's definitely like the fun part, how you can make
Yeah.
Spanish more fun.
Well, I kind of do that already a little bit with TV shows.
Uh,
I do have some fun ones that I watch, but I do that more with Korean right now. It's just, I think even just having this conversation with you back a couple of months ago when we recorded the
mhm,
original episode or the original
mhm.
conversation kind of spurred me to say, what about my heritage? What about the language that I've left behind? And so my husband is like, are you watching another K-drama? Yes, actually I am.
Yes, I
And,
am.
and, and it makes me listen differently, and it
Mhm.
makes me I've noticed that the things that I thought I had this really small vocabulary, but when you grow up in it, it's a little different, right? So but I thought I
Mhm.
had this really tiny vocabulary. It turns out that, and I'm sure Spanish is like this as well, but Korean, like English, it pulls in a lot of words from every other language. It's like
Yeah.
if we don't have a word for that, we just conscript it in and we say it in our with our pronunciation.
Mhm.
And so there's some words I'm just like, well, you don't need to put that in the actual closed caption or the captions,
Yeah,
because I know what okay means, or anyway. I mean,
obviously, yeah.
so do you find that pointing out conversationally those kinds of things in Spanish is also helpful?
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about cognates between English and Spanish, and that's a place that a lot of people start is trying to figure out, okay, what similarities are there
Mm,
between, my first language and now the new language I'm trying to learn? Because when you figure out all the similarities in the cognates, you're like, wow, I already know like 50 words. Look at me. I just started. And it's very it's a confidence booster for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it can
Mhm.
help you automatically think, "Oh, this isn't gonna be so hard."
Exactly. Yeah, and you feel like you've got a leg up, You're starting off on the right foot.
Cool, cool.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Well, where else would we go?
Yeah, so so I talked about interest-based learning,
Mhm.
and I know that a lot of students, come to me asking, a lot of students come to me asking for conversation only. I just want conversation. I don't want
Mm,
all that grammar stuff. I don't want structure. And the thing is, as an adult, you have so much prior knowledge of the structure of your own language that you can actually learn Spanish faster or any second language a lot faster if you learn some key structures early on. So I
mm,
am a believer in grammar, which nobody likes the word grammar, but I'm a believer of grammar. We'll just call it structure of the language, because once you know some key elements of first, like for example, with Spanish verb conjugations, if you know how to manipulate a verb confidently, all of a sudden, you know, you you learn the present tense, but all of a sudden, because you know the structure, you quickly learn all the other tenses because
mhm.
you get how the verb is manipulated, and you just say, okay, give me the endings and I'll just
Yeah.
memorize the endings instead of figuring out all that basic stuff. So I think there's a lot to be said in the beginning about learning some grammar alongside
Mhm.
all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I also think that you should build all your skills at the same time. I think there's something to be said about reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and how they all intertwine together into building your language abilities. I think you can learn a lot faster if you intertwine skills, instead of just saying, I just want speaking practice, because
Mm.
your speaking will only stay at this level, um, and you'll never finesse it or get it to that higher level you're looking for. And I think that the four kind of pillars, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, really work well together if you build them at the same time.
Well, and what
Um,
you're hearing there too is this is what happened to those of us who took it in high school, right? It's
mhm,
like there was a whole lot of reading and writing,
mhm,
and there wasn't as much conversing or listening.
sure.
And so we might retain, oh, I know that word, or I know that
Mhm.
word, or I know that word. But I don't have enough because I never actually got in it and talked to other
That's
people.
right. That's right. And that really comes down to two different types of learning skills. You've got passive skills and active skills. Your passive
Mm,
skills are going to be listening and reading, which you will always develop faster than anything else. So your
mhm,
reading and listening skills will develop faster, at least as an adult, than your speaking and writing skills. Which are active skills. That means you're producing the language, whether you're speaking it or you're writing it. And when I say writing, I don't just mean filling in a multiple choice test. I mean writing paragraphs about your opinions on things and expressing
mm.
yourself in written form.
Oh,
I think
that's
we get
full sentence
full
structure.
sentence
Yeah.
structure. Like I'm not just talking about filling in multiple choice or, fill in the blank, right? Of,
Yeah.
of the types of tests that were thrown at, that were given in high school and
Yeah.
college. Also, it's not about how fast you move through curriculum. It's not how fast you learn all the tenses. It's about how much you retain
Mm,
of that. And so, I think that's a big failure with high school and college classes is they teach you way too much in a way too short period of time. And we just treat it
mm.
like any class, like a math test. And it's just like, I just need to pass this test. And
Yeah.
that's not what language learning is. And I feel like only the US does that. In Europe, you don't see that. You see people actually growing up in these second languages and actually
Mhm,
learning them for speaking purposes and, being fully biliterate, like being able to
mm.
read, write, speak, and understand. Um,
Well, and I think that for those of us who have grown up in that system and who don't grow up biliterate or bilingual or by anything,
mhm,
we are English speakers first and foremost, first and last, and always. Um, but you said something a little bit earlier, and I put a banner up there that said, "Understand how you as an adult already get and understand language structure,"
mhm,
because many of us know and can hear in English when a sentence is structured well and when it's not. We
mhm,
know which words when to use then and than. We know why a certain word means this in this sentence and that in another sentence.
mhm,
And knowing those things and trusting the fact that we know those things, I think really enables at least me when I'm listening and thinking about talking to anyone else, it enables me to compare and contrast, right? To be able to
mhm,
say, oh, because the sentence structure sometimes can be a little bit different
mhm.
and from Spanish to English. And
Absolutely.
especially in Korean, it's very different.
Yeah.
And so being able to compare that really actually helps, and to know that it's not all about reaching some milestone. It's
Mhm.
about retaining what we know, being able to converse at the level we can converse.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's also super interesting with structure and language is, I've learned how much English and the culture I've grown up in is so I focused. The whole language is
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
And says a lot about our culture. Whereas Spanish, there's so many ways to be, impersonal about things or to take me out of the equation and to give actions to things, right? To
Hmm.
inanimate objects. And
Right.
and it's so interesting when you break it down and the cultural messages behind that, and how I centered my own languages and just reflects the individualized culture I come from. Absolutely.
Do you find that people taking your courses recognize that,
Yeah,
or are
I
we
think
still very American in our individual?
I think once you get up into more of an intermediate level, I think you start to realize that because there's a bit more complicated structures that we're looking at.
Mhm,
But it takes students quite a while to wrap their head around why wouldn't I use this in the I form? Like, why
mm,
it's me that's doing it, but there's just some really unique structures that take fault away from me or just remove me from the entire sentence and make it
mm.
very impersonal. And students
That
have to
sounds
wrap their
so
head around
good.
that. Have to
That
wrap
sounds
their head
really good.
around that because
Yeah,
from their cultural, from the language that their first language just doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
Hmm.
So before we wrap up, what else do we need to know? And, like, who would not be a good candidate for going out and starting to learn Spanish, or who would be a good candidate?
Yeah. So I really I really cater to students who are looking to be in learning Spanish for the long run. Like when I say long run, like at least be in it for the next couple years to get to, more of an intermediate level, and then kind of maintain that level for the rest of their life. So something a bit more intense, I guess, and also someone who's looking to improve all of those skills we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people out there that just want to know travel Spanish. They just want to
Mm.
know, teach me how to get through my vacation, some expressions to order food, and those kind of parroted expressions can be helpful, but in my opinion, that doesn't create a lot of connection with people. It doesn't, it's hard to continue a conversation with just parroted travel Spanish. So
Sure.
yeah, but there's nothing like wrong with that. That's just not the style that I teach. So, the style I teach is kind of lifelong Spanish. Here are the pillars. No fluff, but like these are the pillars and the things we need to check off to get you going in the right direction with your Spanish, and also like to be kind to yourself, and if Spanish is a non-negotiable in your life, I mean you're going to have it in your life forever, that it can ebb and flow with like where you are in life. Maybe you just had a baby
Mm.
and you can't be as intense with your studies as you were in the last year. Well, that's okay. There's space for that. We will reassess and we'll find those pockets for your Spanish,
Yeah.
because you're always going to keep it there. It's never going to leave, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are the type of students I tend to look for and attract in working one-on-one and in my programs.
Cool. Well,
Mm-hmm.
your website is laMariposaSpanishLessons.com.
Yeah.
And you do have a free resource.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do have a free resource. It's my beginner's Spanish kit. And you can find that on my homepage. I also have an intermediate guide as well, if you're
Oh,
if
wow.
you're a higher level as well. So that's a 12-step guide to overcoming the intermediate plateau, which we all plateau at intermediate. So
Mm.
some skills some strategies to get over that as well. So.
That's cool. So for those of
Mhm.
you who are interested in potentially becoming a student, or just looking at whether or not this is something that you want to make a non-negotiable in your life, because quite frankly, if you just want travel words, or if you just want to be able to order, there's lots of programs out there that you can
There
get
are.
those words that you're
Mhm.
going to parrot. But if you want something that's going to teach you how to connect with others, this
Mhm.
might be an option for you. This might be a good place to start. And um, you can also hear the rest of Dominique's story on the podcast, episode 121. And it's a really good conversation, and it's all about owning your own non-negotiable, figuring out what your non-negotiable is. Now, before we go, is there anything that we've left out, Dominique?
I think we've had a great chat. So thank you so much for having me here.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us on Intentional Optimists Unconventional Leaders Guest Speaker Series. We hope to see you soon. And until next time.
Awesome.